Ladies and gentlemen, we're now on day 30 of Ukraine's full-scale of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. My name is Andriy Shevchenko. I welcome you at the Media Center Ukraine. Hello to everyone watching us online and those of you who are here with us today, writing about our battle for freedom. Our next guest is Oleksandr Korniyenko, first deputy chairman of the Verkhovna Rada of the Parliament of Ukraine, and we will discuss the latest laws passed by Parliament in conditions of martial law, as well as the political context of the present situation. Oleksandr, Mr. Chairman, hello. I would like to start with the decisions that the Parliament has passed yesterday during the extended session of the Verkhovna Rada. What would you tell us about that? Well, I would primarily talk about perhaps several lines of attack, not just decisions. There's the military and security, national security line. We were looking at several important questions, such as the improvement of our resistance forces. This is the kind of the next step of the deployment of the territorial defense forces. We've been planning this. Had originally been intending to deploy them in peacetime, but now, of course, circumstances are pressing. We have to have other mechanisms at work there, in place there. This is something that's discussed a lot in social media to increase punishment, including possible criminal liability for disclosing the location of our military and the aid that we're being supplied by our partners. It is very important because we've seen several cases now, quite telling, when a blogger or a social media person, or for whatever reason, would post videos on social media, and then shells would come there, or maybe some. And this is very important that people understand that we're in wartime, and you have to control the information a little bit. You have to think about what you say in social media, and also, as far as martial law has to do, this is sorry, Oleksandr, we have a lot of international journalists. Could you tell for them briefly, explain to them what can and cannot be done according to these new laws? Because many of them are doing this. They're trying to explain, because many of them are trying to actually talk about the war using photo and video. Okay, this is very simple. If there's official reports on our website of the armed forces, of the general staff, in their social media, whether it has to do with or the extraordinary situations service, where they're showing the cleaning of the shellings or the putting out the fires. This kind of information can be shared, can be repeated. We're talking primarily about the positions, the deployment. When let's say someone photographs 5 tanks, dug into the ground. Like this kind of stuff cannot be done. I understand that colleagues most of them are professional military correspondents. They know how to work in different conditions, so they can think about what kind of plan, how to shoot, and what kind of information to convey. Of course, you have to take into account. The journalists have to take into account their own security, whether they should continue their research or whether they should hide. We also for information about humanitarian aid. I take this opportunity to announce other events today. You know that right at this moment at the main train station we have the official transfer of humanitarian aids from our international friends. This is 2:30. We plan an informal briefing about the situation on the ground in the combat area. Those of you who are interested, please record yourself and please report in the Google form you see on our Telegram channel. And I think we have connection again. Mr. Korniyenko, you were talking about the key decisions passed by the Ukrainian Parliament. Yes. Well, basically, the idea that we've basically greenlit the reformatting of the university enrollment campaign We understand that we can't do the independent outside testing in much of our territory today, and also in other places where teachers have left, and we won't have the instructors, and so the government within the framework that the Parliament has proposed in discussing this with the society, we are going to propose a mechanism for how this will work this year, the enrollment campaign. Also, we were talking about the social security of veterans. We have now included fighters of the territorial defense. We have now classified them as war veterans. And also the agrarian, the agricultural block, we were talking about agriculture. It didn't take a lot of time, but it was significant. We passed a very important law that will allow us to simplify the farmer life for the farmers. They'll be able to have a sowing campaign in those territories where it's possible. And we know that Agricultural Minister Roman Leszczenko recently stepped down yesterday. We are very grateful for him for starting the agricultural reform, and we have total succession. The political context right now, it's very simple. We're all working together. We don't particularly have an opposition or a coalition. We're all working together, so we have full succession, because Mykola Solecki, who had headed the committee during the agrarian reform, will now step into his role as minister, and will be looking at also the military objectives. As far as our future plans are concerned, we continue our work as a council without obviously with interruptions, with breaks, but it's this extensive work. We're discussing bills, and I'm hoping to have another session next week discussing further questions submitted or asked by the government and committees. I wanted to go into more detail about the changes that are going on in the work of the political parties for our guests, for our international journalists. I will remind them that during the martial law, the government can introduce certain restrictions on the work of political parties. As part of such restrictions, there was the suspension of work of certain pro-Russian political parties, which will obviously demand legal steps from the Ministry of Justice, probably from the courts. Could you explain to us the logic of these steps and what further changes we can look forward to? Okay, the Security Council has turned to the Ministry of Justice with this question. Yes, the Ministry for Justice will be working on this. I think they will move the suits, the lawsuits, as quickly as possible. We're talking about essentially about the suspension of the parties as parties. So they will be prohibited from doing political agitation, taking part in the political process, convoking sessions. They won't be ruling bodies. They won't have registrations. As far as the parliament is concerned, it's a more complicated question because we don't have this kind of close link between parliamentary fractions and the parties that brought them into parliament. So basically all of the we can have non-party, non-aligned members of parliament. So the fate of the parliamentary faction of the OPZZ is now in the hands of its member, who have to decide, morally or in some other way. We have to understand that at every session so far, we have about 4 or 5 deputies showing up at every session. As far as local councils are concerned, we're working on this as well. There's a bill under consideration that would let voters revoke their votes for the people from the parties that have been suspended. But we understand also that we have to be more careful about this in local councils, and we have to put some checks and balances in place, because of course there are councils where the majority of the lineup are the prohibited parties, and so it's very important to work on keeping different opportunities. At the same time, we see that in the local councils, the representatives of the opposition platform for life have themselves started leaving these factions. So this process is is now going on all over the country. We'll be closely watching this, and we're in touch with the Ministry of Justice. We will introduce the corrections, legal corrections. What were the criteria for selecting the parties that you have now suspended? My understanding is that the Council for National Security was looking at the reports of the Security Service of Ukraine. Um, and I also don't think that the fact that the society has no particular question to this list of parties kind of suggests to me that we aren't too far off. The people who have had the opportunity to observe the work of these political forces or their structures, civic structures, so-called civic structures or media structures, understand that these are the forces that largely have not been fully patriotic. Okay, we understand there's different degrees. There is, there is total Russian supremacists, Russian propagandists. Now, okay, I have to. I'm thinking that maybe some of them merit using collaboration laws to them. We have a question from the room.
Use the mic. Yes.
Oh, my name is Luis. I'm covering from several South America outlets. Please, Western countries sometimes criticize Russia because of its lack of political freedom. How to keep freedom in Ukraine during wartime? Sometimes you could be criticized to act similar Russia or not. How do you feel about that?
You know, this for us is a very simple question. Just in order to understand the answer, it's necessary. Maybe you should listen to me for 3 minutes, but then later you would have to spend maybe an hour or 2 hours of your time to look at the Ukrainian segment of Facebook. There isn't much democracy like to what you see in Ukrainian social media. So we do have an open democratic society. Everybody is free to express their opinion. The fans of different political parties, parliamentary or extra parliamentary, there is a discussion, a robust discussion in society. Even in the past month, we've seen several very serious discussions, particularly for the need of the presence of Ukraine being involved in various security alliances or forming a new security alliance around Ukraine. There was a discussion about the possible use of the tools of direct power, such as a referendum for certain questions and problems. As we can see that these discussions are completely unrestricted. Nobody's stopping anybody from talking. As far as the restrictions that are being introduced to the work of the parties, well, this has to do with those figures and those powers that are enemies of Ukraine at the moment. We're at war. People are dying. If some party member emerges, like yesterday, I was watching the Telegram channel of the members of a particular party, and they're continuing their line of how everything's going wrong in Ukraine, and we shouldn't be fighting against Russia. Well, I'm sorry, these are questions of national security, and I think that the level of democracy that we see in Ukraine is robust enough, is enough also during the war, and especially after the war, when all of the possible and democratic processes will continue. And if there is no trust in the government, you can ask the opposition parties in parliament who have the freedom to express their opinion, and they have not been unheard. I would like to also add that the criminal code in Ukraine continues, and there's a number of articles in the criminal code of Ukraine that fit the situation. There's an article on state treason, there's an article on cooperation with occupying forces. This is questioning sovereignty and territorial integrity. All of this has legal basis that was created ahead of time and is being improved at the moment. Mr. Deputy Chairman, about the future, what could be the role of the Ukrainian
Кризи і у мирному процесі.
Political regulation of the crisis and the peace process. You know, I think Parliament on the one hand will always guard the interests of the Ukrainian society. On the other hand, according to the constitution, the parliament determines the role of the external processes. And so if there's any need to change the basics in the parliament of those processes, of course the parliament will perform its functions. But we understand that all of this will be only in the interests of the Ukrainian people and the interests of Ukraine. And I think that there have been no questions so far of the about the patriotic and about the unity of the Ukrainian government and the armed forces and the security forces that are working to defeat the enemy are out of the question, are not under question. As far as the potential to decide to pass any decisions by Parliament, we see that for now the third session, we have passed many decisions, more than in peacetime, which is probably right, because many things have to be changed in the process. And if some basic things have to be changed or discussed, we will discuss them as part of, with all the factions of Parliament. We will pass common decisions that will then be supported in the room. And the final question about the mood in Parliament. This is now several times you've come together. You've passed decisions with a constitutional majority. The physical presence of the deputies in Parliament also demands a lot of personal courage. To be in Kyiv, which is now a main target of the Russian occupiers. What would you say about the atmosphere in Parliament and about the relations, how they are different with what was prior to February 24th? You know, I have the honor to be a member of the Presidium, and I see the room, and yesterday for several, I've thought, not for the first time, and I've had this thought also in the second session, but yesterday I became really sure of this. And looking into the eyes of my colleagues, you know, I see 300 pairs of eyes, I see most of them, and I think they've grown. I don't know if it's right to say that they're more adult. Of course, they're all adults, right? But they were adults when they came together. But this sense, I sense some maturity from this traumatic experience, this horrible experience, but also the experience of unity, the experience of toughness. That experience is there with the deputies. Some of them are fighting. Some of them are fighting with weapons in their hands. And you know, we have a deputy that is now has to ask his commanding officers to visit the sessions. We have people who are involved in humanitarian aid. They can see all of the problems that people are running into. There are people who are evacuating people from the corridor. We have diplomats who travel. They're abroad. They're going, for instance, to the United States. They are. There's a term. Right, we now have a term, angry Ukrainian woman, apparently. And all of these deputies are unified at the moment. We are prepared to work together, to cooperate. Yes, political discussions have taken a backseat to, we understand that, you know, we can come back to them as soon as we win, you know, tomorrow on the TV talk shows and political talk shows, but right now we have to work for victory. And there's a tradition that we have set at our first session. It was proposed by Yaroslav Yushchishin from the Holos Party, the Voice Party. We all sing the anthem. We actually sing it without the backing track. You know, previously there was always a backing track, or there would be a choir. No, we just sing the anthem with our own voices. And even this moment seems very important, very solemn, because it sets us into this mode of being together for Ukraine. We are not supposed to have right now political claims or political presence. Then we announce a minute of silence. This is very important. Yesterday we were joined by our colleagues and partners, friends, brothers perhaps, brothers and sisters from the parliaments of the Baltic states, as well as the speakers of this parliament, of the Lithuanian, Latvian Seims, diets, and the speaker of the Estonian parliament. We've had parliamentaries from Georgia, and we see this unity around Ukraine. And it's not just the Ukrainian deputies who aren't afraid, because many deputies are not in Kyiv. Obviously, many are in their respective districts, or at the fault lines, at various front lines, fault lines, and yeah, even getting to Kyiv for them is a whole story. But when we have people coming in from other countries, from other parliaments, then we understand that we really do have to stand together. We have to show up for session. We have to vote. We have to discuss. We have to get this feedback from society, from the military, from the business interests. And this is the only way right now. Our only goal right now is to win, to defeat the enemy in this war. Thank you. This was Oleksandr Korniyenko, first deputy chairman of the Parliament of Ukraine. Thank you to all of the journalists. Stand with Ukraine.